Today it's my great pleasure to introduce someone who actually needs little introduction in tarot circles, Rachel Pollock. Rachel first made her mark on the tarot world with a publication in 1980 of her book 78 Degrees of Wisdom. And as we all know, the books didn't stop with that one. The focus of today's session is doing readings with major arcana cards only. So over to you, Rachel. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you, Linda. I'm very pleased to be doing this, and I'm very grateful to you for hosting this, and I think it's an exciting thing. A little bit about the major arcana and different decks, but really the main focus is how to do readings when you only have major arcana decks. And the reason for this is because there are so many wonderful major arcana decks. We'll be looking in a moment at some of them, and I'll just, for fun, I picked a couple of decks and I picked cards for each of them. So these are both decks we'll be seeing in a moment in the slides. So as you can see in the aim of the section thing, readings are majors only. One of the issues is, if you do majors, we'll only be focusing on the big issues. If you think of the majors as large subject matters, you know, sort of significant spiritual teachings and big moments in our lives. So can we find small meanings or close-up? Can we get to some of the details of just the majors the way we would do in a normal reading with all 78 cards? So that's kind of some of the concept of doing this. And now I'm going to switch to showing you some of the decks, just because it's wonderful to see the variety of decks. So this one is called Radical Vert. It's the Oswald Vert Tarot, which is, I guess, late 19th century, early 20th century. And then Carol Hertzer, who's from Woodstock, New York, repainted it. And she did in her unique style, which is kind of bright colors, somewhat psychedelic. Here we see the World card and the Tower card and the Death card. And so this is a way of using an ancient deck in a modern setting and modern kind of imagery. So here we have a fascinating Sun card, because as many of you will know, in the Tarot of Marseille, the Sun card shows two people, usually two children, in a garden together. They're not, as you often think of the Rider deck, it's not a single child on a horse riding out of a wall with sunflowers behind them. That's the image most of us know. Instead, the much more common image is a garden, a little walled garden, and there's two figures holding hands. So people often will cite that the Rider deck from Waite and Smith, that that's one of their biggest changes. The Sun card has changed from two figures to one figure. But here we find a very early deck from the early 17th century, mid-17th century, that shows exactly that image of at least maybe not a child, but someone on a horse riding, waving a banner, just like in the Rider deck where he's waving a scarlet banner. So it gives us an interesting set of ideas and possibilities where the Rider deck might have come from. Yeah. Now we have the Shining Tribe, which some of you may recognize as the deck I did. Much simpler pictures than some of these very complicated classic Cartier 17th century images. Here we see the World card, which is also called Shining Woman. It's kind of like a goddess with the whole universe in her body. And then we have Strength in my version is a lion, and it's been untamed. There's nobody holding its mouth. There's nobody, keeping it down. The lion is expressing itself. Then the Hermit, instead of being the wise old man on the mountaintop, it's the figure who's about to go through the dark doorway to the astral world and find the lantern. So it's a kind of an earlier stage of the Hermit experience. Just 22 cards. Instead of just having one card, have several cards for a question. So that's the way you get the subtle play, by having different kinds of cards feeding into the same question. So here the path for someone could be Judgment, the High Priestess, and the Star. So there's like a lot of change going on. Judgment is, very dramatic change, people rising up. The Star is openness. Notice that perhaps the High Priestess comes out of her shell, stops closing off and dressing all these robes, and lets loose and just releases herself. The water is the pool of water. You can't see it here because it's too small, but it's actually the water behind the High Priestess. And here there's water as well, so water is very powerful. Yeah. And then we get to, so the present is more, notice how there's all the blues in the past and kind of yellow and red in the present. Lovers, Empress, and Emperor. Yeah, so it's very strong imagery. So what's interesting is that the Empress and the Emperor, of course, are partners. They're a couple, so they're the two lovers. This is kind of interesting because suddenly we can see this whole different concept of the Empress and the Emperor. They're not just rulers, they're lovers. They are the lover card, If you think about it, in the major arcana, there are no other couple. We sometimes talk about the magician and high priestess, but they're very independent of each other. So if we were left to nominate who the lovers are, it would be, in fact, the Empress and the Emperor. So the present is partnership. Yeah, Linda says she chose these randomly. Absolutely, yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, so it's very dynamic. So we have some major change, releases someone, and suddenly there come the lovers and powerful connections. So let's see what the future will be for. So then this is your reading because you chose these. So you can tell us how this works for you as you're reading. So in this future is strength and the magician, which you saw are connected. They both have the infinity sign above their heads. But then the moon is going to take you into some strange territory. Finding a strength for magic, coming out of this, connection she's making between people. But then the moon card, the lovers become changed into the animals. There's a tradition that says, in the Jewish tradition, that says that all week long we have a physical soul, an animal soul, and a mind soul. But on the Sabbath, from Friday night to Saturday night, we have a spiritual soul. So my question was, well, what is my soul doing the rest of the week, my spirit soul? So I just kind of decided to do a reading and see, where's my soul been? What has she been up to? Kind of, I'm using the term she in the Western tradition of referring to the soul as female. And so that came this idea of, let's say that, there's aspects of your soul that are able to not just be in your body, but in the other world, in the spirit world. There's a wonderful Fool card from the Celtic Wisdom Tarot of Caitlin Matthews that shows someone sleeping, and then there's like his other self leaves his body and travels into the spirit world. So here you would say, you could use the whole deck, but it's fun to use the majors only. So where has my soul been? What has she done? What does she bring back? Which is kind of a nice idea of, what have you brought me? How do I welcome her? Yes, the Lynn says as an example, so we'll see. Okay. So where's my soul been? The Chariot. The soul has been out riding the Chariot. And what's interesting is that the Chariot has the concept of the journeys. In the ancient mystical tradition called the Chariot work, they were traveling into the other world by visualizing a chariot. So the chariot goes to the many different levels of the other world. And what my soul did in the other worlds was go into the moon, into that wild, strange territory, the animal nature. So even though it's the high spirit soul, it's traveled to the animal world, connects to the animals, perhaps become more connected to the animal nature of life. And brings back the devil. So that's kind of wild. So again, from the control self, traveling to the animal, bringing back the devil. So maybe the devil energy was needed and comes from the moon realm, brought back into the physical realm. And I welcome this all by taming the animal. So divine strength from taming the wild animal, or in this case, perhaps making the animal speak, holding the mouth open, so it's going to holding the animal mouth open. I'm a Leo, so that's my card. So I can be on the lion there in that picture.